Okay, I think we can probably make a start. That's about 5 past. Good morning, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining, and a huge welcome to this Find Your Future panel event on careers in business and finance. My name is Chris. I work in the University Careers Service, and before I introduce our panelists, I'll let the panelists introduce themselves. Just a few kind of quick housekeeping items for the session, how it's going to run today. So as you probably heard from the little notification there, the session is being recorded. If any students can't make it today, we'll be hosting this on the Careers Service YouTube channel. Equally, if you want to watch back a second time because it was so useful, you're obviously very welcome. So if people don't want to have your cameras on, absolutely understandable. Although clearly it's always nice to have a smiling audience. So if you do want to put your cameras on, you're very welcome to do that as well. In terms of the audio, everybody is muted at this stage, just so there's no interruptions. There will be opportunities to ask questions during the session though. So at that point, you can either put questions into the chat box, which I'll be trying to keep an eye on, or alternatively, you can raise your hand, which is a button in the reactions tab on Zoom. And if you raise your hand, I'll have visibility of that, and then I'll come to you and ask you, and you can unmute and ask your questions orally. So that's kind of options. In terms of a running order, we've got 3 fantastic employers today. I'm really delighted with this. So we're going to have here from PepsiCo, IBM, and Lidl. We're going to have probably around sort of 5 or so minutes each from each employer, quite short, and then we'll open up for questions after the 3 employers have given their overview. One of the reasons we've kept that quite short, 5 or so minutes for each employer, is to give you extra time as students to ask questions. We want to make sure that the majority of this time is there for you to interact with the employers. It's a chance to hear beyond just the glossy brochures, beyond the promotional text, and ask those questions about what's it really like working in this job, what's it really like working for that employer. So please do take advantage of that. Have a think as you're listening through what you want to ask, maybe make some notes down. And then, there's absolutely no such thing as too many questions. So please do chip in as we go through towards the end. And that's certainly everything I wanted to say at the start. So enjoy the session. And I'll pass over to our first panelist, who I'm delighted to say is Laura Maddock from PepsiCo.
Thank you, Chris. No, it's great to be here. We were just talking about how it's nice to be able to have the opportunity to connect with you, even if we aren't quite able to go around with the freebies on campus. But my name's Lauren and I'm from PepsiCo, and I work in the Emerging Talent team, and I'm the programme partner for our graduate programmes. Shall I kick off with my slides now, or is everyone doing their intro?
Yeah, please go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Perfect. So hopefully this will come up okay. So let me know when you can see it. Perfect. So I'll whip through these slides, but like Chris says, we've got time for questions at the end. So if anything I don't cover, just ask away. So as a company then, we've got a really big portfolio, and under that umbrella of PepsiCo, we've got $23 billion brands, amongst some others as well, and an annual revenue of over $70 billion. And making it all happen, we've got around 300,000 employees, but growing every year. So I think until I joined Pepsi, I didn't quite realise how much was crammed into our umbrella. But here's just a few of the examples of our brands from around the UK. And if you've ever been abroad, you might see some of these having different flavours or other brands as well. So focusing on the UK still, so we've got 10 sites up and down the UK, including 7 manufacturing plants. And you can see from our little map there on the right-hand side, we've got Cooper at the very top, and Cooper makes all of our Quaker oats and Quaker products, all the way down to Reading at the bottom, which is our commercial HQ. We've got around 4,500 employees, but like I say, also growing as well. And in the middle there, we've got our factories, including our Leicester factory. It's actually the largest crisp factory in Europe, which is pretty cool. So every year, through around 300 farms, we source around 300,000 tonnes of potatoes and 125,000 of oats every year, so keeping farmers very busy. And we're really proud that we've managed to eradicate waste to landfill across our UK operations. And we've also invested in energy production at our sites and use 100% renewable sources for our electricity as well. So I'm going to just quickly talk through our programmes as well. So we've got our Future Leaders programme, which is our graduate programme. and our first gen programs, which I'll talk to you about first. So under our first gen bucket, we've got our summer internships, which are in sales and marketing, and these are for 10 weeks during the summer. And then we've also got our industrial placements as well, which are 12 months long, and we've got a range of roles across supply chain, IT, sales, and R&D. So this is to give you a bit of an understanding of some of the roles that we've got. We have got more on our website, so feel free to have a look at all of the job descriptions to find out. But just to give you an idea, so you could be doing anything from design engineering, customer collaboration, nutrition, product development, commercial, and lots more as well. And then I thought I'd just include a few picks from our summer interns from this year. So it's a bit of a hybrid. So you can see their faces on Zoom there with their little personalised crisp packets. But they did also manage to join our field team out in the field. So you can see some of those picks there. So next I'm going to briefly touch on our Future Leaders programme, which is our graduate programme. And we've got this in marketing and sales. So both of these programmes are 3 years long, 3 years in length. And the only real difference in structure is that in the first year in the sales programme, instead of doing a 12-month rotation, we have to do 2 6-month rotations. This gives you the opportunity to try out our field-based roles. So it's a great way to sort of start your foundations, where our general manager started out his career in our field team. So it gives you a real good grounding in sales. In the second year, we really value breadth and stretch in our programmes. So we give you the opportunity for a cross-functional rotation. So for example, if you're on the marketing programme, go into sales or e-com or digital and try that out for a year. So here's an idea of some of the roles that you could be getting involved in if you're on our programme. So for example, you could start out as a sales development executive, try out marketing for a year as a Pepsi Max marketing executive, and then become our national account manager for franchise future brands. On the very right-hand side are some of the ideas of where you could go to after the programme finishes and after you graduate into Pepsico. So now just to touch on our applications. So application closing dates are coming up very soon. So our Future Leader programme closes on Monday, so only a few days left on that one. And then our industrial placements close on the 1st of November and summer internships closing on the 15th of November. So our recruitment process is a little bit different this year, so I'll touch on the first half in just a moment. But our assessment centre is being held virtually again this year, and they'll be towards the end of November, early December, with hopefully offers before Christmas. For this year, we're working with Be Apply to try and remove as much unconscious bias as we can from the process. So instead of submitting a CV, what we'll ask you to do is answer a few eligibility questions. And then you'll do a sort of timed multiple choice test on your verbal and numerical reasoning. And if you need any extra time or have that allowance, just get in touch with us and we can have that added on. And then the main part of this application process is these work sample questions. These are where we'll ask you hypothetical questions related to opportunities you might encounter when you're on the role. And then you'll have a short sort of word count to answer what you would do in those kind of situations. So if you want to have a look at what other opportunities we've got or find out a bit more than what we cover today, have a look on our website and you can see all of those job descriptions and a bit more information. I think that's all from me.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you. Really interesting. I always think the opportunity to work with such huge brands must be just so exciting. You know, the chance to see the work you do in store when you go down to your local shop and see a lot of those brands, those kind of day-to-day brands on the shelf. It just must give so much satisfaction. So, you know, really, really interesting. And yeah, a lot of things I think we can pick up. I'm sure there'll be questions from the students as we go through. So thank you. Right, well, from one large multinational well-known organisation to another, I'm delighted to say that we're going to the next sort of titan of industry with IBM. I'm delighted that Oliver Bond is here to join us from IBM to give us a little bit of an overview. Oliver.
Good morning, everyone. Excuse me. Thank you very much for having me. Now, apologies, I don't have any slides. So don't compare me to the magnificent slides of PepsiCo. So it's just going to be me. And so, Chris, you've given us 5 minutes, right? So I might do a little less, but I'm going to split it into 2 little bits, right? I'm going to talk to IBM, talk about IBM for a couple of minutes. I'm going to talk about me for a couple of minutes, forgive me. Because I think the best way of learning about our graduate opportunities is sort of hear straight from the horse's mouth. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my journey through IBM. So for those who don't know, IBM are a large or the largest technology company in the world. So similar numbers actually to Pepsico. So I think we're about 300,000 as well, 320,000. We've just spun off our GTS business into a sister company called Kyndryl. So that number is it's around 300,000 at the minute. Again, similar sort of $80 billion revenue, and we do operate in sort of 175 countries. So we are a global brand and a global business. We're a technology company. In terms of the sort of work we do, so I'm part of the consulting arm of IBM, which was formerly up until last week called GBS, Global Business Services. So we are part of the consulting brand, but we operate in every sort of industry that exists. Our clients stretch from oil and gas into consumer, into sort of, I don't know, you name it. We are operating in that industry. In terms of what we sell in our product portfolio and what we operate with, from artificial intelligence, quantum, blockchain, cloud computing, and obviously our consulting services as well. So we have a huge reach globally through industry and through our product portfolio as well. In terms of what I do, so I joined, I went to Newcastle University. I did a business management degree for 2 years, and then I did an industrial placement at IBM. So I joined in 2018, and then I did 12 or 13 months at IBM in their global markets team for the BP account. So BP is in British Petroleum. So I was their global markets intern for a year. Then I came back to the wonderful life at Newcastle University for a year and rejoined as a graduate nearly a year to the day. Our careers, primarily, we employ graduates in the consulting arm. So in GBS, it's called the Associate Scheme. We employ about 250 graduates every year. And we employ technology consultants, design consultants, analytics consultants. So if you know, the choice very much is yours. When you rejoin as a graduate or join for the first time, you are aligned to a practice typically. So my background is in automation, although at the minute I'm on a large project in what's called IX, which is interactive experience. So yeah, we have opportunities for undergraduates. We have opportunities for school leavers, which isn't for this audience, but we also have graduate opportunities as well. Salaries for undergraduate placement starts at £18,000. Salaries for graduates start at £32,000. And whilst our graduate opportunities sadly have closed, so we hire in sprints, 1 week sprints. So we had a sprint earlier in this month, and then depending on the quality of those applicants, we might reopen the opportunities, but we will obviously for graduates will open next year. But placement opportunities have not yet opened. So I'll ping some links in the chat in terms of registering your interest. But yeah, I hope that gives you a good overview of what IBM do. It's pretty broad. It's pretty difficult to explain because we do so much stuff. But there are a ton of opportunities, and I've had a fantastic time. So I mean, I'm primarily here to answer questions. So if you've got any questions, just give me a shout. But yeah, I hope that's useful. I'll ping some links in the chat right now. But that's all from me, Chris.
Thanks, Oliver. Thanks. I suppose a really nice contrast there, because from what I interpreted from your overview there was an organisation, or certainly a role that you're doing, working across possibly multiple different sectors. So, you know, the consultancy aspect gives you that chance to work with, whether it's oil and gas on one hand or another sector on the other hand. So yeah,
it's interesting you say that. So I mean, whilst I'm an IBM and I feel one of a huge community, you really do feel like you work for two companies. So I'm on a BP program at the minute, which I mentioned to a couple of you before the call. And so I'm in BP's offices every day. I've got a BP email address. All my colleagues are BP. So and then, you know, 2 months down the line, I might think, actually, that's enough of oil and gas. Well, technically energy now. They're reinventing themselves. Actually, I fancy a bit of consumer, or fancy a bit of automotive industry. So you really have got the freedom to go and play with whatever industry you like. And the great thing about the associates program, which is 2 years, is that you have got that sort of umbrella of sort of safety, right? You can go and play and do whatever you want to do for 2 years, and you've got that support, and you've got that associates manager who's going to support you in whatever you want to do. So you can go and play in whatever industry. Fortunately, I love BP, I love my client, but I know guys who, you know, we've got huge public sector accounts. I worked on the DEFRA account for a small amount of time. We've got a large account, Audi, huge new account for IBM. So I mean, yeah, you're right. You really got the freedom to go and play with whoever you like, which is cool.
Fantastic, thanks, Oliver. Super. So we've gone from a technology consultancy organisation, a manufacturer and supplier of branded goods, all the way through the supply chain. Now let's go to the retailer. And not just any old retailer, one of the fastest growing retailers of the last 20 years, I would fair to say. So delighted to be joined by James Dempsey from Lidl. James, over to you.
Hi there, yeah. So I will actually save everybody the excitement of trying to describe what my job role is, because it's got the most verbose title for no real gain. But I work for Lidl GB. And I guess probably the big difference for everyone we've spoken to about so far is, I think everyone probably knows the majority of what we do, which is we kind of, to use the very recently in trend term, we feed the nation. However, it's a lot more than that with our graduate schemes. And I think, you know, as a business, we have, to Chris's spot on, we are one of the fastest growing. It tends to be between us and the other German retailer who we're not related to, despite some people's beliefs, Aldi, kind of swapping backwards and forwards for the past couple of years as to who's the fastest growing retailer, with only the last 18 months really impacting that kind of, although we are still the fastest growing bricks and mortar retailer at the moment in the UK. Been in the UK for 20 years, started off with one store up above Lutterworth, if anyone knows the area there in the Midlands. Now over 850 stores in the UK. I say over because I actually think it's nearer to 900, but I do lose count because we open about 3 a week sometimes. And I also can't tell you how many employees we have in the UK because it's exactly the same problem. But how we work is we are split across 13 offices nationally, as well as a head office, which will eventually open in Tolworth. Again, another victim of COVID is building a £30 million brand new head office in the middle of multiple lockdowns has meant that we are moving into our new office in January now. But that's relevant to the graduate schemes because we actually offer several across the UK in those different locations. So we kind of have an opportunity to suit you both either the area of a business you'd like to look into, and I'll come on to that in a minute, and also the location. So whilst we do primarily sell food, and I am apparently sat in a virtual warehouse right now, that kind of highlights where our graduate schemes focus. So we have primarily 2 graduate schemes in the region, which are our sales and our logistics graduate schemes. Sales based upon teaching everything from how to be a customer assistant up to store management and above to area management, or into remerch and other areas of our business that we refer to as sales. Really, it's kind of, to make it more simplistic, it's a store-based program, but we call it sales in our business for some reason, very different to the other sales you've probably discussed, we've had other colleagues talk about. We then have our regional logistics programs, which is based in one of these environments. And that there is about teaching everybody, kind of training you, coaching you, the leadership. Both are about leadership primarily, but it's about kind of working through how to be a leader in those environments, how to understand our business. In logistics, it's not just about stacking stuff in warehouses. It's about recycling. It's about distribution. Everyone's seen the lovely stories recently about HGV drivers. Yep, it's about trying to work out how you can get stock delivered to a store when there aren't any HGV drivers. And it's about everything that goes into that. And those are our 13 regional locations, which are often very well suited. You know, in Newcastle, we've got one up in Newton Aycliffe, which is just down the road, I believe. My geography letting me down again. But we also have them in Motherwell, Bridgend, Exeter, Southampton, 13 offices around the country. So if you don't want to live in London and you want to kind of take advantage of the house prices outside of there, then the opportunities aren't limited. We also have our programs which are focused in our new, very swanky Tolworth office with a lovely coffee bar downstairs. I've seen the coffee bar. I've not been able to work there yet because it's not officially open, but it's lovely. With an on-site barista, I think that's my biggest excitement. However, what that looks like genuinely is roles such as buying and audit, as well as that property roles, because when you are the biggest growing retailer in bricks and mortar, you need to buy a lot of land. So we have a number of different schemes which are around acquisitions and construction management for our sites. They're based both in head office and regionally, again, for the property ones. Buying and audit, though, are the two which can be very well suited to people who want to look at something within Lidl which is different. Obviously, we have a huge business. We work in 32 countries, including the US, and we have a central international group. We actually part of a company called the Schwarz Group, and the Schwarz Group looks after all of our all of our countries as an umbrella, with the individual countries working individually. But when you work in somewhere like buying, you actually work across those countries, and that's where it can be really interesting for people with things like international business management, etc. Also, speaking German can be very helpful. Our buying scheme and all of our schemes are 2-year schemes. They focus on initially teaching you the business and then teaching you the speciality. So every single one of our schemes, you will spend time in one of our stores. At the end of the day, if you don't know how our stores operate and what our end product is, our middle aisle particularly, everyone loves that, go in for some beans, go out with a kayak. If you don't understand that part of the business, you don't always understand how our buying works and where we can kind of see to add value in that part of the business. And the same goes for audit. The same even goes for our property team. If you're buying and building land for a store, it's always good to actually know what happens in that store. So that's normally what happens in the first year. We'll teach you through every part of our business, as well as some of the kind of early level specialities. And the second year, it's really about you kind of flying. It's about you in our stores program, running an actual store, or in our logistics program, running a part of the warehouse, or in our property program, attending town hall meetings around planning permission and putting grass on the roof to make sure it fits in, for example. All very diverse, and it really does highlight the fact that you can do a lot of things. And I think that's the one real driver about Lidl, something which Oliver said, which I can really relate to in a business like Lidl. I've got a degree in biochemistry. I work in HR. I joined doing something completely different, but had an absolute desire to work in an area of the business that was, something completely different to what I'd done for 7 years. And as a result of that, I was given the opportunities to kind of cross-train, etc. And that's where Lidl's real strength is. It's the reason I joined the business primarily, was that you might start in stores, but you could end up in property. You might start in logistics, but you end up in audit. There's so many different areas of our business that you can go into. All of our starting salaries for our graduate schemes are 37,000, and you also get a company car. We're slowly getting there with saving the environment with a hybrid company car now, which is a real positive for us. I think we used to be the single largest purchaser of Audi cars in the world. We are no longer that, unfortunately, because they don't have enough hybrids to fit our purchase. So we now work with BMW instead. So there you go, a really kind of all over the place, scattered approach to what Lidl is, but kind of highlights where we are really. We do a little bit of everything. And there was a pun meant there, yes.
Yeah, you've used that before, haven't you, James? I can tell. Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, again, what strikes me there is the opportunity. I guess if you're potentially opening 3 new stores a week, the opportunities as a new entrant into that organisation for personal development, for growth, for opportunities must be tremendous, and the pace of change must be, very, very high. So really, yeah, really interesting insight. And the card and salary towards the end sounded pretty attractive as well, I'm sure, to many people. So thank you. Okay, well, that's I guess the formal introductions from everybody. So now it's really over to for question and answer. As I said at the beginning to the students on the call, feel free either to put anything in the chat box, if you can type it out if that's preferable, or if you like, you can raise your hand. I'll try and keep my eye on the on notifications for that, and then if anybody wants to kind of ask it verbally, then that's an option as well. So I'll pause there, and if anybody has any questions, either for all of our panelists, if it's something that maybe addresses a common theme, or for any individual panelists that pick up on anything you've heard, then please feel free.
Can I just ask, when all of your programs start their applications, so for your graduate schemes, for your placements, that sort of thing, do you have, are they coming up soon, or have this year's missed them? And that's everyone.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in first. So yeah, I think I mentioned briefly in my whistle stop tour of graduate opportunities at IBM. We open for 1 week sprints as IBM, and so that was earlier in the month, sadly, and so that's closed. But then what happens is a big review of all the applicants, and we run assessment centres and interviews and that sort of thing. And then if we haven't filled out the roles for our graduate opportunities, then we will reopen later. in the year. So that has been missed for now, but my biggest tip is just register your interest, get yourself on the mailing list, and then you'll find out. In terms of undergraduate opportunities, so for industrial placements, they've not opened yet. So I have pinged some links in the chat. So for graduate opportunities, sadly, that has been missed for now, but might reopen. Undergraduate, not open yet.
Thank
I'm
you.
happy to go next. So, apologies, dog is barking. But our opportunities usually open around the start of September. So I know it's very early for people are just packing their bags ready to go back. And then our graduate programs close on Monday, so on the 25th. And then our industrial placements close on the 1st of November and some interns on the 15th of November. So not much longer left.
Go trying to unmute myself unsuccessfully. There we go. I just discovered I can press the space bar, by the way. Mind blown. So our graduate opportunities are opened on the 11th of October and are open till the 19th of December. However, that is for our buying, our logistics regional, and our sales program. Programs like our property and audit program will open in January. And I always recommend keeping an eye out, because every year some new department decides to throw onto my desk the desire to run another graduate scheme for a small entry such as marketing or HR, and I have to kind of put together a graduate program ready to go live kind of in January, February, because they decided the headcount gives you that. So I'd always say keep an eye on a little graduate program, because there is a real variety of programs that sometimes drop out where a department decides actually they want to look at something a little bit different. But our big ones are live at the moment until the 19th of November, and then in January for our audit and our property program.
Thanks, James. Well, I had another question. I'm hoping we'll make it some come through from the students. But while we're waiting, I had one which was picking up on a theme actually a few of you touched upon. It sounds like there are multiple different entry opportunities, multiple different roles, and sometimes large organisations have rather confusing job titles. I think I saw in Lauren some of your slides there was things like account management, change management. I'm just wondering whether any of you have roles that you perhaps find it more difficult to explain to students what they actually are all about. So a lot of times something like marketing is relatively well understood by many people, but other roles which you find more difficult to explain to students, and as a result, maybe more difficult to recruit to. And yeah, is this maybe an opportunity just to try and debunk some myths on some of the really interesting roles that exist in organisations such as yours?
I'm happy to keep the same sort of order. Yeah, so try explaining what you do, or for me, trying to explain what I do to my mother is the biggest task. She is not convinced I have a proper job. Consulting, yeah, but what do you actually mean? Yeah, but what do you actually do? It's a real challenge. And yeah, I think the key message is that as consultants, we try and make our clients' lives easier. So that is it in a sentence. So we try and leverage IBM's technologies, and we try and sell as much as we can. But essentially, we make our clients' lives easier and make our clients look good to their bosses. That's our aims. But the thing is, when you're a consultant, you do so many different roles. So at the minute, I'm what's called service designer, which I design our service at the minute. So I'm working with BP to facilitate innovation across their organization globally. But I mean, I've done different jobs, project management, there are tons of roles. But as a consultant, that's the take home message, try and make our clients look good to their bosses and make their jobs easier.
I think from us, I think the ones that I definitely find the most complicated to explain are more sort of supply chain and R&D type industrial placement opportunities. So we've got loads and loads of different opportunities. And I think what I would say is that only one or two have specific degree requirements. Most of them are open to anyone that's got an interest, whether you're doing music or languages or whatever. We're more just looking for that interest. So I think the best thing to do is just have a look on the website, have a look at the job descriptions. And I think when you read the part about what will I actually be doing, that kind of brings it to life a bit more. Because I think you're right, some of these job titles, and I think especially when you're not familiar with them, do sound quite complicated. And then I think for our sort of commercial type roles, They're a lot more well understood. But I think for our summer internships, we tend to keep them more broad and give you a bit more variety. So you won't really focus on one area. You'll be working with the full sort of cohort of interns across sales and marketing, and hearing from different functions. I think it's a good sort of taster opportunity to work out actually what do you want to do moving forward.
Yeah, and I'll kind of actually going to mirror Oliver there. I've got a lovely title that I get asked quite regularly. Actually, I was out the other day with some friends, and they asked me what do I actually do, which is a very common and very challenging situation to say, because at the moment not what my job is. However, I think what Lauren said is absolutely spot on. I think we have some of our job titles, and I always go back to something like our audit program. What exactly is an audit graduate program? You know, it kind of almost gets confused with, you know, you look at the likes of KPMG and PwC, who have obviously tax audit programs, and whereas ours is very different. Ours is actually just around kind of putting people into a department whereby it is going around to stores or suppliers and auditing external processes to make sure they're compliant within our position. And it is exactly that, reading the program, because a lot of the time someone sees something like an audit program and thinks to themselves, well, I don't have a degree that seems suitable for that, so why would I apply for it? Whereas actually we're looking for someone who just has a real desire to kind of get into the kind of details and into the kind of numbers of something, and can really enjoy that, plus traveling around a little bit. So my best bit of advice ever to anybody is, you know, specifically because we don't really tend to focus on what your degree is, we're more about who you are as a person outside of your degree. Sorry, I've got two cats currently fighting on me. Yeah, specifically because we don't look at that, I always recommend, if there's something which just sparks a bit of interest in you in a graduate program, click on it and read through the whole thing, because the chances are a lot of the skill set fits you. And if it's really interesting to you and you can find a way to display that in your CV or in your cover letter, then all of a sudden you may find yourself taking a career which you never thought you would. As someone who's got a degree in biochemistry who works in HR, I can tell you it's very true.
Yeah, some really wise advice there. I think it's that curiosity, isn't it? Just to sort of have a look through, read through it, and you never know, it might be actually attractive. The job title might be misleading or not clear. But if you have that curiosity, that open-mindedness to read through it, often, yeah, there can be some really positive surprises in there. So yeah, excellent advice. A couple of sort of personal questions about your own role in it, and I was going to ask a couple of questions about the application process itself, if I can. But to start with, I'd be interested in this one. What are the best parts of your role, and what are the most stressful parts of your role?
Good question. The best parts are working with our clients on a daily basis and getting deliverables signed off. I think that was my highlight a couple of months ago, was getting your client to actually sign on the dotted line and agree that what you've spent months doing, or spent weeks and months doing, was actually A, what they wanted, and B, good enough. And that is the real, I suppose, getting the validation from clients is my favorite part of my role. What was the second part? Stressful? I suppose the most stressful part is almost the same thing, which is having to report to the people who pay quite a lot of money for your services on a daily basis. Now our team, we get charged out, and that's quite scary. Working on a daily basis with these quite high-powered oil and gas executives that expect quite a lot of work, that's quite stressful. Reporting to those people on a daily basis, sitting next to vice presidents in the office is can be a bit intense sometimes. But again, when you do the work and you get rewarded for it, that's the best part. Hope that answers your question.
So I think for me, I absolutely love having, so we've got loads of grads that come in every year, but obviously then they continue on the programme across the sort of 3 different years. So we've actually got a real sort of buzz of grads all throughout the different years. And I just love watching what they're getting up to. And you watch them through their rotations and challenging themselves. And they're so creative and passionate. They come up with these ideas of working with charities or doing other bits, and I kind of get that vicarious sort of pride or sort of achievement through them, sort of watching them, and then the ones that graduate off the programme, watching them actually become our future leaders, and knowing sort of their journey to get there. I think that's brilliant. And sort of from a personal perspective, I just love working with people, meeting new people, and everyone is so sort of passionate in the business about our grad schemes, and our grads are really passionate. I think it's a bit infectious when you work with people like that. I think stressful, I think it's all about timelines in campus. So we have our sort of 3-month period where we're building up to recruitment, doing recruitment, that nicely coincides with when our grads are rotating into their new roles. So managing the rotations and the recruitment at the same time. That means that hopefully by Christmas you feel very well accomplished and deserve a good break.
So what's the best part of my job other than a 10% discount in the middle aisle? No, in all seriousness, no. I think it's seeing. So I work in our head office, and I'm not always involved in actually seeing the life cycle of our graduates anymore. But what I do see is when they suddenly appear in roles which I never expected to see a graduate go into. So, you know, someone who started one of our regional programs and then has all of a sudden decided they want to go into buying, and I'm walking through the halls of our offices and I see someone who I recognize from a graduate onboarding day we did in September, and I'm like, you know, excellent to see you. What are you up to now? And they're like, well, actually, I've done this, this, and this. And seeing these people who've really developed in a really diverse and really interesting way. And one of the things that we say, many years ago, there used to be the phrase, and I'm trying to hope that Lidl didn't use it, but I've only been with us for 5 years, so we probably did. You used to hear the phrase, you know, what's the cultural fit for the business? But we've gone away from that now, and we talk about what's a cultural add to the business. So every candidate is a cultural add. What do they bring from their unique personality, their unique background, that adds something to our business we don't already have? And I think seeing kind of people from joining our business and doing that, it was a big project I worked on within our business, was to actually look at how we can kind of change that mindset. And I think that's been a real value for me, because I love seeing our graduates just in different departments where they are adding something to a culture that might not have had that kind of a background in there previously. What do I find most stressful? I don't think we're allowed to use the word Brexit, are we, anymore? So I'm going to avoid that one today. But I think I find most stressful probably the fact that sorry, I just had a big bang outside, which I'm assuming my cat. Can I say that's what I find most stressful? I think something's on the floor. What I find most stressful is actually probably the fact that we work in an environment whereby things can change so rapidly and we have to adapt so quickly. One of the things I love about Lidl is that fact we can do that, but there are times when you kind of are dealing with stakeholders that can be somewhat unsure of exactly what the real situation is, and that's where, again, the consulting part of our job comes in, where we have to tell people exactly what to do and why we're going to do it that way, which again is something our graduates get an opportunity to do quite early on, because you know, in all of our regional graduates, they'll spend some time doing a project in their second year, and that project will normally be trying to kind of feed back to one of our heads of department why they should do something differently.
Super, thank you all. And then the other question that linked to that slightly personal one was, it's actually inspired by Oliver's story. It sounds like you were a Newcastle student until very recently. So I'm just interested to hear from each of you, you know, what was that transition like, going from student to worker? How did you navigate it personally? And would you do anything different if you were back in your own sort of final year undergraduate position? What advice would you give to yourself?
Great question, or questions. So don't get me wrong, I loved university. It was absolutely fantastic. First and second year, it was the best time of my life, right? But by the time I was in my, what we call, I suppose you call it stage 3, or the sort of third year, when I went and worked for a year, I moved down to London. I'd been twice before, right? I was a northerner and I went to Newcastle University. I went down, and the main change is the accountability, I think. So at university, if for example, if you sleep in and you miss a lecture, or you miss a deadline, it's all on you. Whereas when you're in the world of work, it's the accountability is sort of transformed, and you are, if you do sleep in and you miss a meeting, well, actually, that's not, you've ruined that relationship, and the world of work is completely different to being a student. And so I think that's the main change, and I think it's a lot. I loved university; it was absolutely fantastic. But by the time, like I say, by the time I was in that third year, I needed something different to motivate me and work, really fit in, and then I could go back for a year, and then enjoy being a student again and learning and all that sort of stuff, all that great stuff. But yeah, the accountability is the main difference. In terms of what I would do differently, I suppose I'm not sure in terms of what I would do differently, but my biggest advice is just get those applications in. And the industrial placement was the best decision I made, because going into my final year I had that offer, and so I could take that stress out. I've got that graduate offer, which is a real good opportunity. So yeah, in terms of doing things differently, I'll have a think. If something comes to mind, I will. But I will add. But I'll hand over to our friend at Pepsi.
Thanks, Oliver. No, I think I did. So I was at University of Sussex, and I did psychology, so more of a sort of not too far from HR, I suppose. But I also did placement year at GSK in HR and absolutely loved it. And I think that's a really good opportunity for people who aren't quite sure what they know what they're doing. It's one that will either confirm you on the right lines, show you something different, or be like, no, that wasn't for me. So that really helped me sort of navigate my career after then. And then I suppose this of my life lesson is that when I graduated, I went for a role that I thought was my dream role, really focused on the job description and actually what the role was doing. I really undervalued what the company was, what their sort of culture was like, and that for me, whilst I love my job, the culture just felt like a real challenging one to work within. So I then sort of had a change of plans and sort of thought through, what company do I want to work for, what culture do I know that I enjoy, that I'm going to thrive in, and then actually the role doesn't matter as much. And I think James and Laura have sort of alluded to that. When you do join one of these big companies like Lidl, IBM, Pepsico, you really start somewhere and you end up somewhere completely different, just by having the different opportunities, and people move, like you said, from finance to R&D to supply chain to HR and back again. So actually I think my advice is to focus on the company and the culture, because you can navigate your career within that. I think, yeah, make sure you're enjoying where you're working.
I pressed the wrong button, obviously, didn't I? So my advice would probably do more IT work. So it's been quite a long time since I was at university, but when I was there, I think my best bit of advice would be something which I say a lot of the time to candidates whenever they ask me what's my best bit of advice for applying for any role, actually. When you're looking for a company, don't try and, when you're being interviewed, if you're doing online assessments around that, just try and answer the questions to represent who you are. Because at the end of the day, when you go and join a business, it's not about you being right for that business. It's about that business being right for you as well. And if you go in there answering questions in a way, or if you look for a business because you think, I want to go and work for that business because of this, and therefore you put a false version of yourself on there, you're actually going to end up working for a business that doesn't suit you. And right now in the current market, there is a situation whereby there's a little bit of choice coming around for not so much for graduates. It's still quite an aggressively competitive market for graduates, but as you get further into your career, there's a little bit more choice around now, and it's probably a candidate-led market, which does mean that you've finally got this opportunity to find the right fit for you. And if there are red flags when you're looking at a business, they're probably going to be more and more so when you're working for them for a long time. So choose a business that you think reflects you, or even better, find out if they do reflect you by being yourself the whole way through, and therefore you find the right fit, which I think will change a lot of people's kind of challenges. We're no longer in a world whereby we work for one company for 20 years, 30 years. That still might be the case in some very rare examples, but a majority of people move jobs probably every 3 to 5 years at the moment. And that means that, it is about finding that really, really enjoyable position where you want to work for that company. And listening to what a number of my colleagues on this call today have said, finding a business where actually they really enjoy where they work, rather than kind of they're working because they want the security of it.
Excellent, thank you all. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Any other questions from anybody on the call and the students? Any questions there? If not, I have one last question which I want to throw out there. Okay, sounds like silence. So in which case, I'm going to go with the last question, which actually picks up on how the last your last answer finished, James, and it's a practical question really. But what advice would you give candidates if they were interested in applying to your company? how can they stand out in the application process? What advice would you give them?
Sure. So do your research is exactly what James said. I think, well, I mean, I really like James's point in terms of finding the fit. It's not, you don't want to mold yourself to the company. You'll find yourself, if you get employed and you're successful, that's because it's a right fit. If you're unsuccessful, it's because it's a wrong fit, not necessarily not good enough for the role. So it really is a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. In terms of advice, do your research, know everything you can about IBM. Learn as much as you can, key dates, read the book. There's a fantastic book by Lou Gerstner Jr., who was our chief executive for 10 years or so in the late 90s, early 2000s. He wrote a book called Who Says Elephants Can't Dance, which is about IBM being the elephant in this metaphor. Obviously, I'm not expecting you to read a book just for one interview, but choose a quote from it, go and read it, learn everything you can about IBM. And if you do have a passion for it, that will come through properly, but just do your research, know everything you can. Just little bits that will make you stand out. And we've got a huge attraction and HR team for the associate scheme. We run a number of assessment centers and things like that. You really will get your shot, so just make sure you stand out and just have a little sparkle about you if you can, something that will make someone remember you. That's my advice.
So I think I'll break it down into the online application for us is completely anonymous, and we don't really take into account your sort of experience, so it's quite tricky to stand out in that. But the way that you can do that is through these work sample questions, so these hypothetical situations. So what I would say is it's not a big word count, so just take your time to think about what are the kind of key points you want to get across. We're not as fussed on spelling or grammar, it's more about the content, so try and get that as good as you can. And then for our assessment centre, so like I said, they're virtual again this year, so it does add some sort of benefits and challenges as well. But like Oliver said, if you've researched the company, if you're sort of able to demonstrate that passion for the role, that's what we're really looking for. And I think another tip is that no one's looking for you to fail or trip you up. Everyone who's on these assessment centres is genuinely trying to give you the best opportunity and really wants to see you sort of showcase your best self. And I suppose they're sort of debunking or demystifying some of the things around the group exercises. So I think a lot of people find these as a little bit scary, but actually most people say that that's the thing that they enjoyed most from the day. And I think for us, we're not looking for someone who's going to speak the loudest, speak over people, have the most to say. We're actually looking to see sort of that more like inclusive leadership. So we want to see you collaborating with people, working with people, and actually, if anyone is a bit more quiet, bringing them into the conversation as well. But again, echoing what Oliver said and James has said, just be really authentic to yourself. I think you can tell when someone's not putting their sort of true self forward, and then we sort of wonder what the real you has to offer. So bring yourself forward.
So yeah, I've kind of covered this off a little bit previously, I do admit, but I'm actually going to now loop back to what Oliver said at the start about doing your research. If I have one more person turn up to an interview and accidentally call us Aldi, that just is just entertaining, at least now at this point. But it really is about doing your research beyond what you can Google, because when someone comes into a video interview and when they record a video interview question, you can see they've got they're looking down at the screen, they've got a little load of notes they've made on Lidl, and they're like, I want to work for Lidl because you've been within the UK since 1994, and you're opening this and this and this, and it just comes across like, you've done the bare minimum. And I'm not saying that's a negative, but you can do the same amount of work in a much more effective way. Now, COVID's kind of curtailed this slightly, so you can't really walk into a store and ask our staff so much back then, kind of, what do you enjoy working about Lidl? But I've seen it a couple of times, and when I see someone on a video interview or in an in-person interview say, why do you want to work for Lidl? Well, I was interested in the business, and then I went and spoke to someone in store who works for them, or I reached out to someone on LinkedIn who works for them. And unfortunately, not everyone on LinkedIn will come back to you, because believe me, my inbox gets swamped with just random stuff. The HR part means that mostly it's recruiters trying to business develop me, but it doesn't really work that way. But it's a case of reaching out to someone, actually getting a good reason to want to work there, because that changes the whole scenario. Saying I want to work for Lidl because they're the fastest growing retailer, it comes back to that previous point. 9,000 candidates can Google that. What can you give as a reason that makes it genuinely unique to you and makes us sit up and go, okay, this person really wants to work for us, but beyond kind of the really, really kind of cosmetic reasons. So that for me has always been a really big tip for you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. We're coming towards the end now, but this session's been insightful in many ways. I think the tips and suppose that we're finishing on here is really a practical sense, but the insights in terms of what the roles on offer are about and some of the personal stories that you've all provided have been really, really generous and honest. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. As we're coming to the end now, we'll just sort of pause the recording. I think Jackie's hopefully on that.